If we're going to be here, let's be here. This line is actually something that changed everything for today's guest on the Schools of Excellence podcast. And I think by the time you finish listening to today's conversation, it actually might change everything for you. So welcome back to the Schools of Excellence podcast. I'm your host, Chanie Wilschanski, and today I am sitting down with Charlie Marcotty. She is a school owner of 4 locations just outside of the Boston area. She's been in the industry for nearly 29 years. That's almost 3 decades. And Charlie's story is one that I think that is going to resonate with a lot of people that are listening, because on paper, she had built something incredible, absolutely inspiring, and quite jaw-dropping if you actually look at it from a paper kind of spreadsheet perspective. She had one wildly successful location for over 2 decades, a team that felt like family, deep roots inside of her community, and then she started to grow. And with that growth came something that nobody prepares leaders for, unfortunately. To this day, still, even with all of the training in the world, leaders still feel so ill-prepared for what growth actually requires. And so this wasn't about a logistics of expansion. It was the breaking point that happens when leadership capacity doesn't catch up with the organizational size as it continues to grow. And so the systems that work beautifully for one location start to fracture across as you start to scale.
My name is Charlie Marcotty. I own 4 locations outside the Boston area. I've been doing this for almost 29 years. And the last 5 years, 5 or 6 years, I guess, we grew, like quadrupled in size. So went from having one really super successful location for the first 25 years, and then all of a sudden just expanded to these other locations. And that has brought a host of challenges and sometimes regrets and sometimes excitement and sometimes pride. This past year in particular has just been incredibly challenging, with all kinds of crises that we had never experienced in the previous 28 years. All of a sudden, they came out in spades. So, and they were at every single level. So financial, on the educator level, on, the leadership level, just, interpersonal, everything. So.
Yeah, thank you. So there's so much I want to unpack here, and we'll kind of zoom back to a couple things that you said here in the introduction, but I want to get started with, you had reached out, I can't even remember exactly the time, a bit ago. What was that initial moment of why you reached out? What were you curious about, and what you were hoping to do together?
So a year ago, we were really looking to focus on enrollment and increasing enrollment. I had kind of a great setup for my team, and it was going to be my job to really look at enrollment. I subscribed to one of your enrollment webinars, and then you reached out afterwards and said, let's talk about it. And in that discussion, you introduced the 5-gear concept to me, which really resonated with me, and decided to commit to working on the 2 most important gears, which were enrollment and financials for us last year, and spend a year doing that.
Yeah.
That didn't work out. Exactly.
Tell us why.
Because then things started to explode. Financial disasters. We went through 4 directors in one location in 3 months, and 50% of the staff left. We had high-level leadership that said, I can't do this anymore, and wanted to leave, and some left.
This past year, Charlie experienced what she describes as crisis after crisis. 4 directors at a single location in 3 months, 50% staff turnover, high-level leadership walkouts, financial disasters, and a leader, Charlie herself, waking up in the middle of the night wondering if she even wanted to keep doing what she was doing. What she did next is exactly why I wanted her to bring this story to you today. I want you to listen to how Charlie describes the moment things started to spiral, because I think it will sound uncomfortably familiar.
It was fire after fire, crisis after crisis. I was in classrooms covering breaks. I was driving, most of my time, as we all were. I was driving down, 7 o'clock in the morning to open a school. And so the luxury of working on enrollment and financials just went completely out the window. And it was about survival rather than thriving.
This is survival mode. So many of you know exactly what that feels like. And here's what I want you to understand about survival mode. It is not just exhausting. It is expensive, and not in the terms of financial spreadsheet. It costs you when you're putting out fires all day. It costs you emotionally, mentally, spiritually, relationally. Because it's not only that you're not growing and not leading, it's costing you in other areas of your life. The cost is high. The thing about survival mode is that it doesn't announce itself. It creeps in very, very slowly. You stop having meetings. You start communicating by text message. You tell yourself that you'll get strategic work next week or the week after. The next week becomes the next month. The next month becomes the next year. And suddenly you look up and everything feels like it's being held together by duct tape and a prayer. This is where Charlie was. And the shift didn't come from a dramatic moment. It came from something much smaller and much more powerful. It came from installing rhythms. And it's what I talk about extensively in my book, This Can't Be Normal.
The most fundamental shift that happened after conversation with you was around those rhythms, those fundamental rhythms. And when all hell is breaking loose around you, how do you ensure that you're going to, that like it doesn't break everything apart? And so talking about that with my team, and that really resonated for them as well. And so we committed to meeting that, even if we were, somebody was standing at a gas station and somebody else was, in Timbuktu, that we were going to meet weekly, and we were going to meet, as often as possible, and keep up that communication and that support for each other. And I think that really did make a big difference.
Where are some of the ways that you saw it specifically, right? Because again, we always want one heroic thing to fix everything, but what you noticed is the predictable, small, steady meetings is what actually created outweighed results. So where are some of the places that you spotted it most? Or even not most, but just where did you see the impact of it?
I think the biggest impact that it had was because I'm super close to my team. They're like sisters to me. We've been together anywhere from 15 to 25 years. I literally have my sister and my husband and the sister of my ex-partner, who is like my own sister, who are all employees, right? It doesn't matter. They still are afraid to tell me the truth. They still I can blink wrong and they get hysterical about it.
When Charlie and I started working together, the first thing we looked at wasn't enrollment numbers or financials. It was communication. Specifically, when does your team actually talk to each other? Not by text, not by email, not by drive-by conversations in the hallway or outside of the bathroom. When is there real, dedicated, protected connection in conversation? There are a lot of things that you can talk about in a conversation. Logistics, operations, numbers, all the utility of the building. You could talk about a lot and be communicating, but you're not connecting, okay? You're not having connection. And if you think about it in the context of other relationships, right? In marriage, let's say, you and your spouse could talk all day and communicate all day about who's picking up Johnny from soccer and who's in charge of this. And did you pick up the milk? And the garbage day is moved because of the snow days. So now it needs to be taken up this day. So don't forget to take it. You guys are literally communicating all day long about logistics and keeping the house functioning. When are you connecting? That is a totally different experience versus communicating all day long utility-wise versus actual connection and intimacy. Totally different thing. The same thing is in leadership. Leaders talk about, we have great communication. I'm like, you guys talk logistics all day long. That's amazing that you know how to do that. You are not connecting relationally. That is a totally different kind of communication. And here's what Charlie found when she looked honestly at that question.
when you don't meet, things build up. And emails and texts that go back and forth, they just like get misconstrued, and they get, all of a sudden there's attitude in them. And then, it breaks down communication when you don't meet and have conversations.
I'd love for you to decode that for us a little bit.
Sure, because when you meet one time, everybody like walks out energized, and they have their lists, and they're, I'm going to do this and you're going to do that. And then life takes over, right? And you can't really read your notes. You don't know, you wrote
I love that. You can't read your notes. That's
right.
So
Yes.
true,
Stephanie
Charlie.
will,
Yes.
is what it says. And, so like life takes over and things get busy, and you just, you lose that momentum. And so having that rhythm and the regularity and the commitment to each other is important, because it then you all get back together and everybody goes, oh crap, I think I was supposed to, whatever. And then they look at their notes, and they email me and they say, I'm a little confused on this. I know I was supposed to. So it creates that accountability as well.
So, okay. So this is where I wanted to take you next. And so I'm glad you brought this up. So we obsess in this industry, I find, so much in trying to figure out how to hold people accountable. And what you noticed here with this repeated rhythm of enrollment was that container in itself created a force function of accountability, where people are coming forward and saying, I was supposed to do this, I didn't do this, or they're coming to you, right? And so how did that shift the internal structure or culture of the organization, that accountability became a byproduct of installing that rhythm? This is something I see over and over again with leaders that I work with. We underestimate how much damage is done in the silence between conversations. I'm going to say it again. We underestimate how much damage and trust erodes in the silence between connection and conversation. So Charlie made these meetings non-negotiable. Not when it's convenient, not when people are in the mood, not when we remember, not when we're fully staffed. Non-negotiable. Non-negotiable every single week, no matter what. Even if someone was pumping gas, they had to log in via Zoom into that meeting. Even if someone was working remotely, you show up. And here's what happened when she did that consistently, predictably, and reliably. Consistently, predictably, and reliably. That is rhythm-based leadership.
I think the power of that rhythm is, number one, you're showing people, you're demonstrating to people that their voices matter, their minds are important,
Yes.
That it's a collaborative process.
We need to stop normalizing dysfunction. We need to stop normalizing that success should feel like survival. It should not. This is what Charlie installed inside of her center.
So just getting those people together, and again, giving them the message that you're important, your voice matters, you're out in the sites every day, or you're, in your home in, another state, working hard. I want to hear what you have to say. I want to let's talk about new initiatives, or let's just, talk about how stressful this month was and what we're going to do to take care of ourselves. It's that connection. Connection is just so important. I think introducing that concept of a rhythm and a non-negotiable rhythm felt like relief to them, of yes, wait, yes, this does feel really good. I want to commit to that, instead of everybody kind of going, oh God, do we have to meet again? Recognizing the value to that, and making the commitment themselves.
Charlie showed her team relief on the other side of this. And so the meeting stopped feeling like a drag or just something else they had to do, or why bother? I have so many other fires to put out. I don't have time to do this. I have so many other important things I have to take care of. And now they started finding restoration and safety inside of this container, inside of this rhythm that she created, a safe space where things actually move forward. And so they get momentum in the meeting. Instead of getting momentum from putting out fires and urgency, they get momentum from the meeting. Ooh, that's a completely different story. That is the power of rhythm-based leadership. That is the power of rhythm-based leadership. But here's what I really want you to understand, okay? None of these rhythms would have taken hold if Charlie hadn't made the shift in herself first. She had to shift because you can install all the meeting structures in the world, all the systems, all the US, all the processes, all the checklists, all the spreadsheets, all the SOPs, every single piece of software in the world. If the leader who is running all of this is not attuned and present and fully committed and fully honest about where they are, none of this works. None of this works. It is not infrastructure. It is Band-Aids all day long and expensive Band-Aids. Charlie had her reckoning moment. She had her rock bottom reckoning moment. And I want you to hear it in her own words.
I realized that for the whole year, pretty much, I had just been phoning it in. That, I was ambivalent about whether I wanted to stay in the role. I was thinking about, I would wake up in the middle of the night and think, I got to get out. I'm done with this. This is not working for me anymore. But what that means is I was shortchanging the organization and I was shortchanging the potential because I'm in it. The chance of somebody walking in and offering me, the check that I would want to exit immediately, is slim to none. So I'm in it, at least for a couple of years. So I may as well make it the best that it can possibly be. I may as well make myself the best I can possibly be. I may as well help my leadership become the best they can possibly be. And if we're going to be here, let's be here. And let's be here with 100% intention and 100% authenticity and 100% vulnerability. It doesn't mean 100% perfection. We're not going to, that's not going to what we're looking to achieve, but just 100% effort.
Play back and listen to what she said. If we're going to be here, let's be here. I want you to sit with that. I want you to think a lot as leaders. We operate in this in-between space on the fence, right? Not fully in, not fully out. Just kind of enduring, tolerating, martyring, overfunctioning, overgiving, silent suffering, going through motions, waiting for something to change without having to stand behind the decision that actually changed the pattern. And what I want you to hear from Charlie's story is this. The conditions for change do not appear.
One of the things that happened a couple of months ago was somebody who was in a high leadership role, who who seemed like they were a hugely important part of the team left suddenly. Yeah. And as devastating as that was, that opened a door to realize how toxic her presence had been.
Charlie made a decision and put a line in the sand, and something remarkable happened. The dysfunction that had been sitting in plain sight actually started to surface for her to see it. It was sitting right there in plain sight, but she couldn't see it. A high-level team member left, and what followed was a realization of just how much toxicity had been normalized because of that person. And rather than treating that loss as a catastrophe, Charlie treated it as this beautiful opening to enter her new era of leadership.
Watching that exit and then embracing the opportunity that, any loss brings, a door closes, a door opens, and being open to, okay, so this feels devastating, but how are we going to make it work for us? How are we going to make it positive?
This is what I mean when I talk about friction. Change doesn't happen without friction and tension. You must have the discomfort. In fact, I go as far as to say, if you introduce new standards and nothing feels uncomfortable, you don't have standards. You're still placating and playing appeasement. Standards are supposed to make people feel uncomfortable because when you raise the bar, something has to give. Either people rise to meet it or they reveal that the dysfunction was actually working for them. It reveals that the dysfunction that you have been tolerating and saying this is normal now reveals itself. Ooh, that dysfunction was working for them. This can't be normal. This can't be normal because it kept them from being accountable, actually accountable. And those people will self-opt out. And that's not failure. That is the system working exactly as it needs to be because that's infrastructure. That is infrastructure actually being built. That is what I deconstruct in my book, This Can't Be Normal. And so now Charlie's team is more resilient. Their conversations are a lot more functional. And they've adopted a new mantra, one that speaks directly to the reactive cycle that traps so many leaders.
Firefighters only go out on a call 5% of their time, right? The rest of the time they are cleaning their trucks and practicing their ladder runs and going in the community and doing prevention. And so that's what we have to focus on.
Now, the thing to understand is you don't move once from firefighting to prevention. You don't make a one-time decision and now you're going to be proactive instead of reactive. That's not how it works. That's the arc of Charlie's story. But for Charlie's story to continue to be an arc of intentionality, of purpose, of deeper connection and relationships.
You can't run a business without intentionality and certain workflows. And nothing is set it and forget it.
Nothing is set it and forget it. The rhythms, the meetings, the check-ins, they only work if you keep returning to them. And that's the whole point. That's the power and restorative power of rhythm. Not in the one big initiative or the one big push or the one big pace bonus or the one big pay scale. It's not in the heroic moments. It's in the return. It's showing up again and again and saying, this matters, and I'm not going to stop showing up for it. It matters. I want to stay in the game. I want to stay in the game. So if Charlie's story resonated with you, I want you to reflect on it. And I have a couple of questions for you. Where do you feel like you're still holding the invisible weight of leadership by yourself? Where are you relying on personality and heroics instead of returning to rhythm? Where does your school look stable on the outside, but feels very fragile underneath? If you want to build infrastructure that holds, even when you're tired, even when you're not in the room, that's exactly the work that we do inside of our Leadership HQ program. HQ is for leaders who are done surviving their own organizations and they're ready to install infrastructure, which are standards, ownership, and rhythms that actually create predictable safety, profitability, and growth. You can apply. The link is in the comments. And if you're serious about leading differently this year, I really want to invite you to apply. Also, if you have not had a chance yet to pick up our book, This Can't Be Normal, it is available worldwide wherever books are sold at thiscan'tbenormal.com. Thanks for joining me. If you are loving the Schools of Excellence podcast and have gotten any value out of it for your school, I would love if you can do two things for me. One, subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. And two, can you please leave us a review? Reviews help other school leaders know that this is the place to learn how to build a school of excellence. And I would be so grateful if you can do that for us. Your help and support makes this show to be able to be listened by the thousands of other school leaders all around the world. Thanks so much for listening, for giving us your time and attention each and every week. And I appreciate that you have joined us.